it was nice to see that the book had hit, a market that people were interested in. And to your point, I was thinking, well, this is helping me. And if it's helping me, and if I could share it to others, my point wasn't necessarily to make lots of money, which, again, I haven't. It's more focusing on how can I put a product out creatively that I really respect what I'm putting out in there, doing the best that I can, share that with the world as low cost as possible to help others. And that seemed to, again, be at the right place at the right time. And there was an audience that was there, which was great.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 397 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Ron Vitale. Ron is a fantasy and science fiction author of 18 novels and 4 nonfiction volumes of the Let Go and Be Free series for adult children of alcoholics and those who grew up in a dysfunctional family. Now, Ron and I talk about his writing. We talk about the fiction versus the nonfiction. And we also talk about one of the things that led me to want him to have on the podcast, and something you're probably already familiar with because I've talked about this a few episodes back, is Ron's openly sharing for the past 10 years his financial situation as an author, how much he's spent on various things like editing and design and covers, etc., versus the income he's made. He takes a very unflinching and very authentic and honest look at the reality for most writers. And that is not something we regularly see. And I love what Ron has to say about why he feels it's so important for him to be honest, because he is in it for the good that his writing can do for the world as well as for his intrinsic spirit. Anyways, it is a fantastic and inspiring conversation, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Superstars Writing Seminars, which takes place February 6th through 9th, 2025 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is a conference all about teaching you the business of being a writer. And longtime listeners know I'm really passionate about helping authors understand the business of being a writer. This episode talks about that business, and in some cases, the desire isn't necessarily to make lots of money. The desire is to change lives. The desire is to do something that feels rewarding and fulfilling intrinsically. Regardless of your goals and dreams as a writer, understanding the business is critically important, which is why I think Superstars Writing Seminars is awesome. And if you've never gone to Superstars, you can use code MARK1592, that's MARK 1592, to get $100 off your registration. Now, in addition to being the MC for Superstars Writing Seminars, they're kind of stuck with me, so they may as well put me to good use. I'm going to be doing 3 different talks there. I'm doing Making the Most of In-Person and Hand Selling. That's one of my talks. Another one is on Author Branding for Success. And I'll also be doing a draft digital one, which is 13 ways, the lucky 13 ways that authors can leverage draft digital tools for their writing success. And I'm going to be on some panels, including the economics of self-publishing, something I'm very passionate about. Writers of the Future. I'm their latest judge, writer judge there. How to sell books directly to your readers, and horror, scaring up an audience. And of course, As always, in the last several years, of course, I'll be working with my big brother, the awesome, the one, the only James Artemis Owen, with the endowment auction, which we introduce with a humorous shtick that we do. 2 years ago, we did the Blues Brothers, just a short shtick to introduce that auction. Last year, we did Bob and Doug McKenzie, those Canadian brothers, and this year we're going to be doing a different set of brothers, because, hey, that's just part of the theme, right? But it's for a good cause. It's for the numerous scholarships for Superstars Writing Seminars. And if you want to check them out, it's superstarswriting.com, and it's coming up early February 2025, and you can use Mark1592 to get $100 off your registration. And just a few comments from recent episodes. For episode 396 over on YouTube, Dina the Knitting Author said, "Great interview, enjoyed it very much. I read both Moon of the Crusted Snow and Moon of the Turning Leaves in 2023. Great reads." And thank you for that, Dina. Dina's talking about my awesome interview with Wabgishik Rice. Fantastic. I'm so excited to have Wab on the show, so thank you for that, Dina. And over on Patreon, via Patreon, I got a message comment from Stanley B. Trice, one of my awesome patrons, who for episode 395, which was a rant related to very much the topic, a lot of what Ron and I talk about in this episode. Stanley says, "Thanks for episode 395 about authors telling their revenue, but not their expenses. It can be discouraging listening to authors make a lot of money when their net profit is much less. I have 5 self-published books and have yet to turn a profit in any year since I started 5 years ago. Actually, I'd have to win a lottery to break even. Yet, I will continue to write, edit, and publish because this is what I enjoy." Stanley, I want to thank you so much for this comment and for the fact that you're not giving up on writing, because that is one of the main reasons I wanted to have Ron come on this podcast. I so love just how Ron shared openly in a manner that is encouraging, because he talks about his reason. And Stanley, it sounds like you have a very similar reason. Okay, you haven't turned a profit. To be quite honest, Stanley, I'm not sure if I turned a profit in the first 10 or 15 years that I started writing. Now, that was probably because I was spending money on postage and mailing things in self-addressed stamped envelopes with return envelopes and stuff like that to publishers in the hope to, sell some short fiction. So it did probably take me 10, 15 years before I actually made money. I mean, I got my first actual money for fiction writing. I think it was meant to be, I think it was $5 and a contributor's copy of the magazine. I don't think I ever got the $5, but I didn't care. I was so happy to be published. And looking at the economics of things, it took me a heck of a lot longer. Yes, and with self-publishing, even though I started it back in 2004, there are many, many years of not turning a profit, and we don't talk about that enough. And that leads so many authors to want to give up. And I know this is important to Ron. Stanley, I know it's important to you, and it's very important to me. I don't want other writers to give up just because it's costing them more than they're making. Because, honest to goodness, I truly believe in my heart the world needs writers now more than ever before. The world needs you, dear listener. They need you to tell your stories, to write your stories, to share them with the world. Please, please, please do not give up on yourself. And please don't give up on sharing your great comments. I love when you guys share your reflections and comments. There's going to be an opportunity coming up in episode 400, just coming up in several weeks from now. It'll be coming out in February while I'm at Superstars Writing Seminars. But I'm going to roll a bumper, and I'm going to talk about that in my personal update. All right, so personal update. I'm not going to get into my own writing because I'll tell you one thing. I made some commitments to a mastermind that I'm a part of last week, and stuff happened and I wasn't able to attend it. And I just sent them a note saying, the things I said I was going to get done this last week, from the list I gave you, I got SFA done. And SFA is a short term I use when I don't want to say a bad word. And one of them is the F word. I swear, but I got sweet nothing done, basically, is another way of saying that. Now, I got other things done, but not on my list. And I've struggled, and I'm behind on several things. And even one of my co-authors was so gracious, so kind. I want to say thank you so much for your understanding and patience in me not getting to what I thought I was going to have a chance to get to. I've just been so slammed. So that's where I am as a writer, and I'm hoping that by the end of January, maybe by the end of 2025, I can pick myself up and get back a little bit more on track. But as episode 400 is sneaking up on us, I've done a few things, a few cool things. And first, I want to say a huge shout out and thank you to those who support this podcast over at Patreon, as well as my coffee buddies. I do appreciate you guys. Your financial support does mean the world to me. That financial support coming in, actually, the patron, anyway, the patron deposit that happened was my very first income for 2025. Very exciting. I think it came in on either the first or the second. So that was kind of a neat thing to look at as I'm in that tracking mode for receipts and expenses for 2024. I'm off to a great start. I got everything recorded. And it's kind of funny. Here's an interesting thing. I'm 16 days into January. I have received, 5 different sources of income. One of them from patrons as well. And so 2 of them were from retail platforms, payments. And then other ones were just other sources of income as a writer. But my expenses right now, as things stand, based on my income and my expenses, I'm probably about $500 in the hole. So there you go. See, it's the 16th of 2025. I'm already $500 in the hole when it comes to my writing expenses. And so, again, not all sunshine, gumdrops, and rainbows. But let's get back to I was thanking my patrons and my coffee buddies who support the podcast at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as buymeacoffee.com/markleslie. Thank you guys so much. What I'm doing is I do want to get your reflections as listeners for the podcast. So I'm doing a few different things. So the first thing I'm doing is I am setting up a special Zoom hangout for those who follow me over on Patreon. And this is for all followers. It's not just for those who are followers who are members who are providing me money, but you can follow for free and still get access to it. So if you head on over to patreon.com/starkreflections, you'll see there's 2 different Zoom hangouts. And these are going to be on Tuesday, January 21st at 9 a.m. Eastern for about an hour. I'm going to be hanging out. Anyone can come and go as they please. Same thing on Saturday, January 25th at 3 p.m. Eastern. And there will be links over at that post that I shared on the 16th of January over at patreon.com/starkreflections, where you can click on that link and get into those Zoom hangouts and come and go as you please. It's just going to be an informal hangout where we're just going to be chatting about writing and publishing. But what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to get some sound bites, some audio bites of your reflections. So that's one way to leave those reflections, where you just show up and you can say something really cool, and I'll record the whole thing and I'll use chunks of that. Not the whole thing, but I'll use chunks to create a clip show for episode 400. So that'll be a lot of fun. And again, you can come and go as much as you want. But I've also posted a link, and this link will be at starkreflections.ca for this episode. It's a form where you can share your reflection. You can key it in, you can type it in if you want, or you can record a video or audio, and you can upload it, and I'm going to extract that audio for episode 400 so that I want to share your reflections with the entire community. I love hearing your voices. I love hearing your thoughts. I love reflecting on the things that you're reflecting on. That's what I love about this community. That's why I love you listeners so much. You make me want to continue to learn and reflect, and you make me think about really awesome things. So there's over on Patreon, there's links that are going to be there. And again, the reason I'm doing it there rather than right on the show notes is you kind of have to take a few steps to get there, even if you become a free member there. And I'm not trying to bait and switch you or anything of the sort. I just don't want to publish those links to Zoom publicly in a way that's easily accessible because of the Zoom meeting bombings and stuff like that. Bombing sounds bad, but people who crash those meetings. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of making it relatively easy for people to get to, but they have to take a few extra steps to get to it in the hopes that we can just have just kind of a hangout that's writers hanging out and having really good conversations. And so that's why I've sort of pseudo locked it down or made it a little bit harder to get into, but not requiring anything other than you just having to be a conscientious human, maybe? I don't know what that is. Anyways, I'm looking forward to it. Really, really want to hear your reflections. Really would love to have as many different voices as I can for episode 400. And that's it. I am done with that's personal update is really just about celebrating this podcast and the awesomeness of you. Yes, because I want to share your awesomeness with the world. And again, you can key those things into the form. If I would rather hear your voice, but if you don't want that, if you're uncomfortable with that, I'll read it for you on your behalf. I'll be your voice actor in any case, but I do not do I'll try not to do special voices for you, unless you ask me to. But that's it. That's it for the personal update. That's it for the introductory matter. But without further ado, let's get on to this fantastic conversation that I just had with Ron Vitale. Hey, Ron, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
No, thank you so much for having me, Mark.
I want to get to the reason why I reached out to you because you posted something in the Wide for the Win group. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the books that you're writing. So you've got a particular style of book for a particular audience. Can you tell my listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, this goes way back. I grew up in a family where I had a member that struggled with alcoholism, grew up in a dysfunctional family,
Right.
and back in my 20s, started going to therapy and learned about the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional World Service Organization.
Right.
And they follow 12 steps, the Serenity Prayer. And at the time, I was trying to figure out, like, how do I basically heal from some of the trauma that happened in my past? And so I started going to those meetings. And then over time, I was like, hey, you know what? I have this experience. It was right before lockdown for the pandemic back in 2020.
Okay.
And I had a goal of writing a blog post a day. I would put this up on my blog, and then I would share it out to a small newsletter group. And at the end of 100 days, I said, I'm going to create a book of that. Well, I did that 4 times, and I had 4 volumes in the course of about a year and a half. And again, some people were making sourdough recipes during the pandemic, this and that. I was like, well, I'll just write as many books as I can. I write fiction, but then I was like, during this particular period of the pandemic, I want to focus on something that would help other people. And so I wrote these Let Go and Be Free books about how to basically overcome your past if you grew up in an alcoholic and dysfunctional family.
Wow. I mean, wow, that is just amazing. So many questions. I'm going to go back and say, so the pandemic, that was the trigger for we're starting to do the writing because you had suddenly no commuting time or whatever it was. Had you always wanted to be a writer, or was this something that slowly evolved in your life?
Yeah, no, I had always wanted to be a writer. I wrote my first fiction short story back when I was 8 or 9. Wrote my first novel at 16.
Oh, wow.
Started publishing fiction novels. Been an indie author since 2011.
Okay.
To date, I've had 18 published fiction books, but I really didn't do a lot of nonfiction.
Right.
And so I decided, hey, I've been doing all the fiction thing. I know how to do all the writing. I have all this other experience. I have my uh, we'll just say official background, and I've got a master's degree. I wrote a Jungian psychological approach on Margaret Atwood and Alice Walker of how they overcame trauma through their writing. And I was like, well, why don't I do something similar? Again, it was right before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic happened, I was like, oh, I'm just going to really explore this because, to your point, I didn't have commuting time. We were in lockdown. And I was like, well, I need something to kind of be an outlet. And I just went all in and decided to write these 4 books in a very short amount of time. I didn't have a lot of success with my fiction writing. We could talk about fiction and, if you like, of how challenging that is for marketing. With the nonfiction, I just found it was easier to get the word out through different groups, through different like Amazon ads. And for whatever reason, that market seemed, maybe it was such a niche that I was able to hit the right place at the right time. And I've had, to date, my best success as an author is with these books.
Wow. So I want to go back to this because you got your master's and your thesis was Alice Walker and Margaret Atwood and trauma, and yet you were working on novels, and then in 2020 you took something that had always been there, obviously, something that you'd been dealing with, and started writing those essays. For anyone listening, because I'm sure there's people who are listening who's like, because it's not an uncommon challenge that people face. So what are the titles of these 4 books that you've put out?
The first volume is Let Go and Be Free: 100 Daily Reflections for Adult Children of Alcoholics. So
Okay.
again, the point of the first book was to be, I've got this 100 reflections every day. You would read a short, page or two, and would help you kind of get your mindset through
Right.
the course of the day. And
Okay.
at the time that I wrote this, I think there were a lot of people looking for some kind of guidance, some kind of help, because
Yeah.
many of us, what do we do at this time? We're in lockdown. How do we overcome this? And
Yeah.
I was able to get this book out at the right time.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. So that was the first one. And then what's the next one?
The next one, you'll see there's a theme here. It was Let Go and Be Free: 100 New Daily
Ah,
Reflections,
look at that. Okay.
and then yeah, so it was basically, 100 new, 100 more
Okay. All
reflections,
right.
and then 100 final reflections. And it was just, my point was, I wanted to do at least 365. So
Yes.
I did 100 per book.
Right.
I did over 365.
Yeah.
And the point was, you would have each day a person could read, you know, a,
Yeah.
a reflection, a passage, a page or two, different, dealing with topics on, how to focus on dealing with anxiety, catastrophizing, dealing with letting go of something, dealing with stress. I've had
Mm.
topics, that you don't necessarily have to have grown up in an alcoholic family to have those,
Yeah. Yeah.
struggles. But I wanted to focus on something, that things I've either learned in therapy, in going to different ACOA meetings over the years, or what I've learned through other self-help books, et cetera. Something that, again, that I could give back to a community.
Yeah. Well, and I guess because this is something that was very personal for you, this was something you were helping yourself, but you were also reaching out and helping others. You probably heard from people who've discovered these books, or I imagine the blogs themselves, the comments, I imagine the interaction, right?
I have to say, on the blog itself, interactions were very small, but through email, from people replying to me on newsletter lists,
Right.
or responding through reviews and such on, Amazon and other platforms, it was nice to see that the book had hit,
Yeah.
a market that people were interested in. And to your point, I was thinking, well, this is helping me. And if it's helping me, and if I could share it to others, my point wasn't necessarily to make lots of money, which, again, I haven't. It's more focusing on, how can I put a product out creatively that I really respect what I'm putting out in there, doing the best that I can, share that with the world as a low cost as possible to help others. And that seemed to, again, be at the right place at the right time. And there was an audience that was there, which
Yeah.
was great.
And I was even imagining, I was just thinking about that. Somebody commenting on a blog that's public. Maybe it's more of a private sort. I imagine because I've also had these sort of comments from listeners when I share stuff that's very personal on the podcast, for example, is I will get not necessarily a public comment that other people can see, but I'll get a private email where somebody wants to share something. Thank you, because something very similar happened to me here. Let me share it with you. And of course, I respect that privacy. I imagine that same sort of thing happened, right?
Exactly. Yes. That's where I received, more feedback on a personal nature, where people reached out and shared their feedback of how the book helped them. And I have to say, reading some of the reviews that people have left too, it was nice to be able to see that
Yeah.
again, that I was able to share something. That the interesting thing to me when I look back is when I look at my fiction work, these themes of overcoming trauma and stress, they're all in my fiction books.
Right.
And when I switched to nonfiction, it seemed to be people were looking more for help and guidance on something of a like a like, hey, I need something to kind of help me through these struggles, whereas my fiction books were doing something similar but in a different way, and
Yeah.
that didn't seem to hit the same audience, the same market, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
The topics of what I'm writing about is pretty much the same. One was
Right.
in fiction, a character overcoming such struggles, but in nonfiction, that's where it seemed to be really hitting more people on
Right.
a basis where they can really latch onto and kind of follow.
So I always love, because I've been in the book industry since the early 90s, I always love to reflect on this. And I know most people don't read. People who don't read will read a nonfiction book if it pertains to something useful to them. Whereas, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like 1 in 4 adults in the US has actually read a book since high school. And so
Yeah.
the 1 in 4 who regularly read, who've discovered your fiction, probably go see themselves, right? That's the thing, is representation in fiction is so important. You read something and go, oh my God, yes, I know, buddy, I get it. And that's probably helped those people, but there's not as many, unfortunately. Therefore, it's like, oh, I need this. I need to I need to quit smoking. I need to deal with these issues that I've not like. So interesting. So what I'm curious about is, has this changed what you plan on focus on as a writer? Or I mean, you still writing fiction, or is it nonfiction now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've honestly I've struggled with this, and the best answer that I can give you is I want to do both.
Yes.
I am currently writing another fiction book. It's a sequel to a book I released last year. I didn't really do any marketing because it's a new series. It's a book one.
Right.
And as you probably know, marketing something where it's just book one and there isn't a book two yet probably doesn't make a lot of sense to spend
Right.
money in that area yet. So I'm thinking, let's work on book two, probably going to be a book three, finish that series. And in the meantime, I'm starting to put together what do I want to do with this other nonfiction series. I had a podcast called Let Go and Be Free. It was almost 3 years old. I
Oh,
just closed the podcast because I had to come to the decision of I only have so many hours in the day.
right.
And if I want to write another book, I can't do the podcast, I can't do the fiction, I can't do the day job and all the other things in my life, my family, etc. Something I needed to let go of.
Right.
Part of, again, my message of sometimes we need to let go of things. And
Yeah.
so I've let go of the podcast, and that has made more space for me so that I can focus on what do I want to do with other books. And I'm looking now, I finished book volume 4 of the Let Go and Be Free series. At this point, it's almost 4 years ago. So
Oh,
I think that I could really kind of come things a different perspective. The world is a different place than what it was, 4 years ago. Um, so I haven't started anything yet with nonfiction, but my intention is I'm going to finish the fiction book and then switch gears and do something in nonfiction.
oh, wow. Wow. All right. So we've teased listeners a little bit about a post that you shared, Wide for the Win, and it's very much related to what you just shared here, because you shared part of that in the post. But you said you had 18 books out of fiction,
Yes,
right?
yes.
How many series?
Let's see. I got my Cinderella series. I got my Werewolf series, Red Door Diary series, Realm series, and I just started Origami series. So I currently have like 5 series that are out there.
Wow.
The biggest one is my Cinderella Secret Witch Diaries. I have 6 books in that, and that is a completed series.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was basically a retelling of like what happens to Cinderella after she marries the prince. And again, I focus a lot on the trauma she went through when she was young. You can see
Yeah,
where
of
that theme
course.
comes through. And she marries the prince. He's a cad, and bad things happen. But then there's this whole growth process where she realizes that essentially she has magic ability. And so it
Right.
changes the whole center of the story, where it's not just to be being pretty and being married to someone, but finding magic within yourself. And so I have that series. So again,
Oh,
that's
wow.
a 6 book series. I've been writing as an indie author. I started 2009, published my first book in 2011, and just have been going,
Wow.
through the years. Just keep putting
Huh.
books out.
Well, that Cinderella series sounds fascinating, actually. And then you said something, a werewolf series. I gotta ask.
Yeah, a werewolf series. I decided to come up with a premise of with Moby Dick.
Were
Moby
whale, you
Cap
said. Okay.
where whale.
Okay.
There is Captain Ahab in Moby Dick. It's basically the story of his daughter, who basically is going after and trying to find him after, the whole tragedy of Moby Dick, what happens there. And
Huh.
it's a very like gothic horror,
Yeah.
very interesting kind of theme. And it's actually a prequel to my Cinderella series. And I don't want to give any more
Oh,
away of
wow.
that.
Oh, so they're
Yeah,
connected. Oh,
they're
that's
connected. It's like an interesting world that I kind of built, connecting things all together.
Oh my God, awesome, awesome. I'm so glad I asked and learned a little bit about these books because I'm going to check them out. All right, okay. So you had shared a blog post. So you had all this fiction, four series already. You're working on the fifth one now. And you shared something that's very uncommon especially in the indie author community. And the prelude is most, and I've ranted about this on my podcast before, is people will share, oh, I made 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever they made, and they share these big giant posts. And this is in groups of upwards of 80 or 90,000 authors. And you have maybe 100 authors who share that. Let's look at the statistics because I know the statistics because I've worked
Yep.
in the industry and I see the sales is 100 authors out of 80,000 share this, but the other 79,900 authors all feel like they're useless and they're idiots and they don't know what they're doing and they're pathetic and everyone else is making money. But you shared something that I think resonated with tens of thousands of authors.
Yeah, it's very difficult to put this out because, again, you have to look at your own self-worth and you say, if I put out into the world all this effort that I've done in writing and learning as much as I can about AI and marketing, etc., and I have limited budget, it's really difficult to say I lost money last year as an author.
Yeah.
Yet, my purpose in doing that is I specifically want to reach out to other authors that feel similar to I do and say, there's only maybe 1 or 2% that are making these 6 figures, 5 figures. And you look at what they're doing, and if you really look into the numbers, because often those people say they're a 6 figure author, but they don't tell you how much money they're actually spending on advertising and all the other things that they need to do.
Yeah.
um, when you look at that, you have to sit there and say, just because if you're doing something and you're being creative and you're not being the 5 figure or 6 figure author, that doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the world for you. You suck, you're this or you're that. No. What it might mean is maybe, I'll speak for myself. Maybe I need to learn how to write better. Maybe I need to know how to write to market better. Maybe I need to do better in advertising, etc. I see it as an opportunity instead of saying, well, I'm going to give up. I'd much rather say, I haven't achieved the success that I want yet. So I've been doing this now since 2011. I have been putting out my numbers for the last, I even forget, 10, 11 years or so. And there's only been maybe 3 or 4 years where I've made somewhat of a profit
Right.
over all those years. This last year, unfortunately, I did lose, wasn't a lot of money, but it was still losing money.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very honest in my post. I put what I've spent, how much I spent on marketing, how much I've done this, that, and the whole thing. And this last year was a resetting year for me. I wanted to not spend a lot of money on marketing, on advertising. So I knew that my gross revenue was going to be down because I wanted to focus on other things in my life. And I knew that it was going to be a difficult year. Now in 2025, I have to make the decision. I'm writing a fiction book. I just stopped the podcast. What do I want to do with other nonfiction work? I'm working a day job. I got a family. Again, there's only so many hours. So I have to decide with the little amount of time that I have, what do I want to do? This year, I want to put my toes back in and learn a little bit more about where is the state of advertising in 2025? How can I learn to make the limited budget I have go far for me and to reach out? And I share these numbers because, frankly, I have been very frustrated where you'll see a few authors share, oh, I'm raking in all this money. But you only get to see a little bit of what that really is. They don't really say how much they're spending or how much they're putting out on paying a, other service or some such thing. So you don't really see the full scope of what does it mean to be a six-figure author. And for me, having a family, I had to make a decision and I opted to steady income. I have bills to pay, kids to raise. I did not want to try something where I was so stressed out if I didn't know if I was going to be able to make enough money to be able to keep food on the table for, my kids when they were younger. And it was something that I made that conscious decision. Full time is going to be my job. And then anything I do on the side is going to be a second career.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for doing that because it's so rare. It's so refreshing and it's so rare to see authors sharing something like that because on social media and a lot of those authors groups it's basically social media where we put a filter on and we try to make I mean, I'll be honest, like here I put this is just a black t-shirt, but I put this as part of my brand. I always it's like I'm still wearing jeans or whatever, right? We put on a filter for social media to make ourselves look better in some way. And what you've done is decided to open the kimono, and you've been doing this for 10 years and share, hey, here's the reality of my world. But here's the thing I love about this. Two things. Your final message in that post is I don't want you, the reader, to give up. You, the author,
Yep.
the listener, whatever, please don't give up. That is such a critical message. Because the other thing is you still love what you're doing. You love your family. You've got a job that I imagine you enjoy at least somewhat, or
Yep.
make it work if it's not. But you have balance, and you've decided to quit things that are not being useful to you potentially because they take time away from something I think you're more passionate about writing probably than podcasting, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'll say this. I have it's I wouldn't call it a New Year's resolution, but every year at the beginning of the year, I have a goal of I'm going to start a new book, whatever that book is.
Right,
And
yeah.
so this year, when I sat down and I started to write, the joy that I get in sitting down and writing. Again, my writing time is typically 5:30 in the morning,
Yeah,
between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning before work,
right,
about four times a week. I have a schedule that I kind of do either exercise or write. And
right.
that's, I bring that through. So it's a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's a habit, and I make that a habit and I keep writing. And to your point, my message is if you get to the end of your life and you look back, I do not want to be one of those people that say, I didn't try to be creative and put books out there. I didn't have these ideas in my head that they never got to see the light of day. I have made, some successes in selling books. There have been some years where I've had some money come in. There's been some years where I lost money. But over the scope of my life, again, I've been doing this since 2011, being an indie author. I want to keep moving forward. I don't know what the future is going to bring. Maybe I'll have a big success. Maybe I won't. But I do think that message is important to other authors out there. Do not give up. Be creative. Write something. You might write something that could inspire so many people. Or as I've had a reader send me a personal message. She has MS and said, I have inability to be able to turn pages. And I listened to an audiobook of your Cinderella book and it transported me and it was so wonderful and it was amazing. And I was so touched by receiving that message,
Yeah.
from a reader. And as an author, I say to myself, yes, it would be great to make more money, to be able to pay more bills with being an author. And maybe that will be in my future. And again, I want to keep iterating, keep learning, keep being curious. But that is not going to happen if I just expect I'm going to magically make all this money and I do one book and it's just suddenly going to sell. That's not reality. And I think by being honest with other authors and putting out my failures and my successes and what I've learned over the course of a year, I do think it does help others to be able to question their own goals and what do they want to do. If you're in it just for the money, then I would say, sure, you might have the ability to be able to do that, but you can probably do certain things. And that's not what I'm deciding to do. I'm not in it just for the money. I'm in it for the creativity, the learning process. And I've had some, again, amazing successes. Does it translate into six figures? No, but I don't know what the future is going to bring. I really don't. And if I don't keep trying, I'm never going to know what that's going to be. And even if I get to the end of my life and I say, oh, I only made a couple $1,000s my writing, how many people actually take the time to see their dream, to follow it through, and to do that writing anyway? So I think as an author, that is the path that I have made. It's a challenging path, but I want others to see that it's not hopeless. It's not easy, but it's something that I hope others continue to do. I think the world needs more artists and creatives than ever these days.
Words straight to my heart. Wow. Thank you so much. That is so powerful, so inspiring. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on the podcast. And I'm also so grateful for the fact that I've taken time out of your day prior to the workday. We're recording this early in the morning before heading off to work. Maybe I took away some of your writing time. I really do appreciate that. Ron, can you please let my listeners know where they can find more about you online?
Yeah, sure. They can visit my website, ronvitale.com. Got my nonfiction there, all my fiction there, and I'm wide on all the platforms. I believe in being out as much as I possibly can and getting my work as many different places as I can.
Awesome. Well, Ron, thanks again so much. I'll have links to your website. I'll have links to those blog posts, etc., at starkreflections.ca. Thanks again for hanging out with me.
No, I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
You all know probably that I could reflect on so many of the great things Ron said. And again, if you end up seeing the video of the interview as Ron's saying the final thing, I've got my hand on my heart as I'm thinking. And I did the same thing when I was listening back to the recording. As he was saying that, I put my hand on my heart and went, oh, you're speaking right to me. You're speaking to the depths of my soul. And yeah, like I said, I could reflect for hours on that. But it is so important. I said this in the comment section earlier in the show, but I think it bears repeating. I seriously do not want you to give up on writing and putting your words out into the world. It's not always about the money. It's about the impact, the powerful and important and critical impact that you as a writer can have, even if it's for just one person whose day you improved, who was inspired, who smiled, who laughed, who cried, who felt anxiety and tension and then resolve in the storyline, whatever it was that you created and you put out into the world. There's a reason for that. It's that human connection that comes with our writing. And I so believe in it. I so believe that you have something that is important to share with the world. And I don't want your voice to be stifled. That is so critical. It's so important. And I'm so glad that Ron shared this message. And that's why I want to spotlight and broadcast this message to the world. I want people to hear this because what he has to say is so important. It speaks to me so much. I hope it speaks to you. The other thing that I wanted to reflect on is, and this is a really important thing. So Ron's got a family life. He's got a job he loves, and he did confirm after the interview, and he confirmed, no, he loves his job. He just really is passionate about his job, and he's great at it, and the people he works with, all those things. Loves his family, and he loves his writing. And so he was doing this podcast, but he had to make a hard decision. He had to let go of it. He had to let go of something. And that's not easy to let go of something, especially when you've invested a lot of time and energy into it. But it's so important that we actually have to take a hard look sometimes at some of those things and say, no, this is important to me. I need to make this happen. A personal example, I'll just dig into this just for a second, is Liz and I are going to be moving to the West Coast. We're going to be moving to Victoria, BC. It's for a phenomenal reason. Two of her daughters and their partners live there now, and her other daughter is going to be moving there. So all three of her kids are going to be on the West Coast, and our granddaughter, our beautiful, beautiful baby girl, granddaughter Nora, is there, and she was born in October. And I've only seen her once. Liz has seen her twice. We're planning on going again in February to visit. And I think it's going to be so important. I just love this kid so much and want to spend time with her when she's young. I don't want to be the distant grandparents. It's hard for me to leave Ontario. Sudbury and Ottawa and Hamilton and Waterloo have been my home. I've only ever lived in Ontario. I mean, I've traveled to all parts, not all parts, but many parts of the world, and I've enjoyed exploring and stuff like that. But it's always been great. I'm so close to so many people that I've been friends with since I was a kid. But and my kid who lives with his mom an hour away in Hamilton, who's 20 years old. That's hard. That's really, really hard. But I can travel. I can make points to do special things. Alex and I, for example, spent the weekend. We went to go and see the live Die Hard on stage, and we had an absolute blast. And then we talked. We went out for dinner afterwards and talked Marvel Universe and comic books and stuff, because Alex, of course, is inheriting the thousands of comics that I have, mostly Spider-Man comics and stuff like that. Because I mean, with this move, I was going to wait to give them to Alex to inherit, but why should I move all of these comics all the way across the country just for them to come back? May as well give them to Alex now, so Alex can do what he wants with them. Anyways, it's hard. It's really hard for me. I mean, it's easy for me to be with Liz and to go where Liz wants to go because I can work remotely. That's easy. That's flexible. But it's going to be hard for me to be away from so many people I love. And to be, I mean, I know awesome people on the West Coast, in Victoria, Vancouver, etc. I know so many amazing people, and there's writers I'm going to get to be closer to and hang out with, which is going to be awesome. I love that, but there's so many people I really like here, and the new friendships I've curated here in this area. It's going to be sad that I can't just go for a coffee with them or go grab a beer or whatever the case may be. But that's a decision I need to make. That's important for my family as well, and for Liz, and being supportive of my partner, who means the world to me as well. Anyways, I'm getting into this personal reflection based on Ron making those hard decisions. It's a hard decision. It's an easy decision, but it's also a hard decision. And sometimes easy decisions are hard and hard decisions can be easy. But all I'm saying is sometimes we have to pause and we have to consider and weigh the things and make those decisions. When it comes to your writing life, it comes to Ron's writing life, what Ron recognized was important was family and work, and understanding that the work supports him and his family, and making the decision to say, I want to keep writing because it means something important to me. Therefore, I'm going to have to drop the podcast in order to get more writing done as well. So that's an important reflection. And again, hard decisions, making those things, and letting go, not just letting go like Ron has in his nonfiction series, but letting go of those things that are maybe getting in the way of your goals and the things that you want to do as a writer. And so the last thing, it's not a reflection, and this is, I'm going to credit this to Nikki Guerlain, who is a very generous supporter of this podcast over at buymeacoffee.com. And Nikki, thank you so much. What I'm doing is I'm going to be taking some of what you've provided recently to me, and I'm giving that to the community. I want to share that with listeners as much as I can. And I want to do this in a really important way. So if you, dear listener, are interested in Ron's books, now, it could be, he talked about a series, it could be his reflections for adult children of alcoholics, or it could be his fiction. And whether you want the ebook or the audiobook or the print book, I would like to buy them for as many of you as possible. What I'm doing is I'm putting aside $200 to do this. I want to take that $200 and I want to invest it in giving that to you guys. So it's going to do two things. It's going to support Ron. I really want to support him. I love what he did, and I just want to show support. I mean, I went and bought his I bought Ron's Cinderella book in audio, and I'm really looking forward to listening to it because I loved when he started talking about it. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. I think I'm going to like it. So I went out and got that right after our conversation. I mean, A, because it sounds like an interesting book, and hey, never hurts that I'm supporting, a writer I respect. But I want to support Ron by giving something to you guys. And if you are interested in his fiction or his nonfiction, just reach out to me privately, mark@markleslie.ca. I want to buy as many as I can with that budget that I've put aside for it, because I really want to take Ron's message and compassion, and I want to give in a way that supports him, but also gives back to this awesome and amazing community. I love you guys so much, and I appreciate you being there. So I want to, like I said, support a writer who inspires me, and I want to bring something good into your life, because you can potentially enjoy some of his fiction or benefit from his nonfiction. Isn't the world a better place when we're looking out for one another and wanting to support and help each other? And I appreciate the support that you guys give me, whether it's financially, whether it's listening, whether it's leaving a review of the podcast, or whether it's sharing this episode or any other episode that resonates with you with someone that you think is going to find value in it. Because spreading value, spreading love is so important. And I want to thank Ron for spreading love. I want to thank Nikki for being so generous, so I was able to take that money that Nikki invested in this podcast and invest that on her behalf into the community. So it's really the community supporting this awesome community. And I adore this community. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for letting me bend your ear yet again. So until next week, and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.